The Arizona sun beat down relentlessly, baking the earth into a cracked, unforgiving canvas. Elias Vance, a man etched by years of solitude and the harsh demands of his small ranch, wiped sweat from his brow. His days were a monotonous rhythm of mending fences, tending to his few head of cattle, and the quiet hum of isolation. He had left the conflicts of the Civil War behind, seeking peace in this desolate landscape. But the echoes of war, in a different form, still resonated. The clashes between the U.S. cavalry and the Comanche tribes had intensified recently, making every distant dust cloud a cause for uneasy vigilance. Today, however, a dust cloud unlike any other approached. It was small, frantic, and drawing nearer at an alarming speed. Elias squinted, his hand instinctively going to the worn grip of his rifle leaning against the porch post. As it drew closer, he saw it wasn't a rider, but a figure on foot, stumbling, clearly in distress. His heart, long hardened by loss and solitude, gave a faint lurch when he recognized the small stature, a child, a Comanche child. She was no older than 10, her buckskin dress torn, a deep gash on her arm bleeding freely. Her eyes, wide with terror, darted behind her, then fixed on Elias with a desperate plea. She collapsed just meters from his porch, whispering something in a language he didn't understand. But her meaning was clear. Danger. Soldiers. Before Elias could fully process the scene, the faint sounds of horses and distant shouts reached his ears. The cavalry. His mind raced. Turning her away meant certain capture, likely death. Taking her in meant direct confrontation, a breach of neutrality he had painstakingly maintained. But looking at her small, trembling form, the decision was no longer a calculation of risk, but a simple act of human decency. He scooped her up, surprisingly light, and hurried inside his humble cabin, the sounds of approaching hooves growing louder with every hurried step. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with tension. Elias gently laid the girl on his cot, quickly assessing her wound. It was deep but clean, likely from a glancing bullet or a sharp branch. He retrieved his worn medical kit, a relic from his brief time as a medic's assistant during the war. As he cleaned and bandaged her arm, the girl watched him with a mixture of fear and wary curiosity. He spoke to her in slow, calming tones, knowing she wouldn't understand the words, but hoping the kindness in his voice would translate. "You're safe here, little one," he murmured, his gruff voice softer than he'd heard it in years. "No one's going to hurt you." Outside, the shouts intensified. A patrol of U.S. cavalry soldiers, led by a stern-faced Captain Miller, surrounded his cabin. Miller dismounted, his boots crunching on the dry earth, and approached the door, rifle at the ready. "Elias Vance, we know you're in there. Have you seen a Comanche girl around 10 years old fleeing this direction?" Miller's voice was sharp, accusatory. Elias walked to the door, opened it just enough to show his face, and leaned against the frame, feigning a relaxed demeanor. "Captain, what brings you all this way out?" Miller's eyes narrowed. "Don't play coy, Vance. We're tracking a young Comanche. She was with a raiding party that attacked a wagon train near the river. She's a witness, and frankly, a casualty we need to account for." Elias paused, his mind working furiously. "A child? Attacking a wagon train? Captain, with all due respect, sounds like a desperate tale. Haven't seen a soul pass through here all day. Been out working my fields since dawn." Miller stared hard at him, his gaze sweeping over Elias's slightly disheveled appearance. He clearly didn't believe him. "Vance, harboring a hostile would be a grave mistake. We have orders." "Orders or not, Captain, I'm a peaceful man just trying to make a living," Elias retorted, his voice firm. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got work to do." He began to close the door slowly, subtly blocking Miller's view into the cabin. Miller hesitated, then his eyes caught sight of something on the ground near the porch. A small beaded trinket, clearly of Comanche origin, that must have fallen from the girl's tattered clothing. A flicker of suspicion crossed his face. "Vance, if I find out you're lying, there'll be consequences." Elias simply nodded, holding Miller's gaze until the captain, after a moment of frustrated deliberation, ordered his men to search the immediate vicinity, then, finding nothing, to move on, muttering threats under his breath. As the sounds of hooves faded into the distance, Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to the girl, who was now sitting up, watching him with an intensity that belied her age. A fragile, unspoken alliance had just been forged. Days turned into a delicate dance of survival and burgeoning understanding. Elias, despite his initial apprehension, found himself growing accustomed to the girl's quiet presence. Her name he learned through a series of hand gestures, and a few Comanche words she hesitantly offered, was Nita. She was wary at first, like a wild bird, but slowly, meticulously, a fragile trust began to bloom. Elias taught her simple English words, pointing to objects, repeating their names. Nita, in turn, showed him how to identify certain edible plants he had overlooked, and how to track game with a keenness that surpassed his own. He learned snippets of her story, a raid on her village, the chaotic escape, the terrifying pursuit by the soldiers. Her people, she conveyed through gestures, were scattered, desperate. Elias felt a pang of sympathy that resonated with his own past, a shared understanding of loss and displacement. One sweltering afternoon, while Elias was repairing a loose board on his barn, Nita, who had been sketching with a charred stick on a piece of discarded wood, suddenly dropped it. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon. Elias followed her gaze and saw it, a small yet distinct dust cloud. Not soldiers this time, but a group of riders, too many for just a few stragglers. "Comanche," Nita whispered, her voice a mix of fear and a desperate hope. Elias felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. The moment of truth. Would they see him as an enemy for his pale skin, or as an unlikely ally? He considered hiding Nita, but dismissed the thought. He had made his choice. He stood his ground, rifle in hand, but held it loosely, not in a posture of aggression, but of readiness. The riders, about a dozen strong, drew closer, their faces grim, their painted shields reflecting the sun. They were warriors, armed and clearly on edge. They fanned out, surrounding Elias and his cabin, their eyes scanning every detail, every shadow. Nita, despite her earlier fear, now stood beside Elias, her small hand gripping his pants leg, a silent testament to their bond. The lead warrior, a formidable man with a long braid and piercing eyes, dismounted. He carried a feathered lance and looked at Elias with an unreadable expression. Elias knew this was the chief, or at least a respected elder. He raised his empty hand in a gesture of peace, lowering his rifle to the ground with his foot. "I mean no harm," Elias said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his heart. "This girl, she was in trouble. I helped her." He gestured to Nita, who, to his surprise, stepped forward slightly and spoke rapidly in Comanche, pointing to Elias, then to her bandaged arm. The warrior listened intently, his gaze shifting from Nita to Elias, a flicker of something resembling surprise in his eyes. Nita finished, and the warrior looked at Elias again, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. He nodded slowly, then turned to his men, speaking in a low, guttural tone. The tension, thick just moments before, began to dissipate, replaced by an air of cautious contemplation. The Comanche warriors dismounted, their initial suspicion replaced by a quiet observation. The lead warrior, whose name Elias learned was Running Wolf, approached Nita, speaking to her softly. She recounted her tale, gesturing to Elias, detailing his kindness and how he had sheltered her from the soldiers. Running Wolf listened, his eyes occasionally flickering to Elias, a deep respect beginning to etch itself onto his stoic face. After Nita finished, Running Wolf turned to Elias. His English was broken, but understandable. You, good heart, you save our kin, our people. We do not forget. Elias simply nodded, a wave of relief washing over him. He had risked everything, and it had paid off. He offered them water from his well, and they accepted, their rigid postures relaxing slightly. They stayed for a short while, assessing Elias, observing his humble dwelling, and the girl's obvious comfort in his presence. Running Wolf saw the sincerity in Elias's actions, the genuine care he had shown for Nita, a child of their tribe. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, Running Wolf made a gesture of farewell. He spoke to Nita, then turned to Elias. She comes with us now, to her people, but you are friend. Nita, looking torn, hugged Elias fiercely. Thank you, Elias, she whispered in English, a testament to their shared time. My family. She pointed to Running Wolf, then back to Elias. You, family too. Elias felt an unexpected lump in his throat. He watched as Nita mounted a horse behind one of the warriors, looking back at him with a wide, grateful smile. The Comanche contingent rode off into the setting sun, leaving Elias once again alone, but not entirely. The silence of his ranch felt different now, imbued with a sense of connection, a thread woven between his solitary life and the vast, complex world beyond his fences. He had risked his life for a stranger, and in doing so had found an unexpected kinship. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into a month, each one painting a new layer onto Elias's solitary existence. He returned to his routine of mending fences and tending cattle, but now a subtle shift had occurred within him. The emptiness that had once echoed through his days was replaced by a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet anticipation. He found himself looking to the horizon more often, not with the old trepidation of approaching conflict, but with a hopeful curiosity, wondering about Nita, about the Comanche tribe, about the fragile peace that had been so unexpectedly forged. The encounter had irrevocably changed him, softening the hardened edges of his isolation and reinforcing his belief in the fundamental goodness that could exist even in the harshest, most unforgiving lands. One crisp morning, as the sun began its ascent, painting the desert in hues of gold and amber, Elias stepped outside, a steaming coffee cup warming his hands. He took a sip, the bitter liquid a familiar comfort. But as his gaze drifted towards his barn, the cup clattered to the dust, forgotten. His eyes, usually so keen and observant, widened in utter disbelief. His barn. The entire front wall was covered, not with the defacement of graffiti, nor the scars of damage, but with shields, dozens upon dozens of them, each an elaborately painted Comanche shield, a burst of vibrant color against the weathered wood. They were not haphazardly thrown or tacked on. No, they were meticulously arranged, overlapping slightly, forming a breathtaking mosaic of tanned leather, intricate paintwork, and feathers that shimmered in the morning light. The air itself seemed to hum with their silent presence, a testament to immense effort and profound meaning. Elias walked closer, his boots kicking up small puffs of dust, his breath catching in his throat. He reached out, his calloused fingers tracing the smooth, hardened surface of one shield, then another. They weren't just decorative, they were real functional shields, each bearing the marks of honest craftsmanship, a silent testament to the warrior who carried it. And each one was more than just an object, it was a symbol, a potent symbol of protection, a profound symbol of gratitude. He circled the barn, his awe growing with every step, seeing that the same intricate display continued around the sides, a continuous band of honor. The Comanche had returned, not to take, not to fight, but to honor. They had come in the dead of night, moving with a silent efficiency that only those deeply connected to the land could possess, working tirelessly under the cloak of darkness. And then, as silently as they arrived, they had vanished, leaving behind this profound, undeniable message. It was their way of acknowledging his bravery, his unexpected kindness, and the life he had saved, a life precious enough to warrant such an extraordinary tribute. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, picturing it. Nita, perhaps, standing among her people, her small hand directing the precise placement of a shield. He envisioned Running Wolf, his stoic face now perhaps bearing a rare, subtle smile, watching his warriors bestow this unparalleled gift. The barn, once just a functional structure, a humble part of his solitary life, was now utterly transformed. It was no longer just a barn, it was a monument of trust, a towering testament to intertribal peace, forged by a simple act of humanity. Elias stood there for a long time, the warmth of the rising sun on his face, the immense weight of the gesture settling deep in his heart, leaving an impression more profound than any battle scar. The dust and the shadows of the Old West still existed, a harsh reality of the frontier, but here, on his solitary ranch, a vibrant canvas of shields spoke volumes of an unspoken treaty, a powerful visual reminder that even in a world defined by conflict and division, humanity, compassion, and unexpected alliances could not only flourish, but leave an indelible, breathtaking mark on both the landscape and the very soul.